He's so handsome, and I'm just a broke virgin. That's what Nerissa Cole thought when she got stuck in an elevator with the most handsome man she'd ever seen. What she didn't know was that this stranger was Severo Belandi, the boss of the most powerful mafia in Chicago, and that he heard every single word. Hours later, while dozens of wealthy heiresses waited to be chosen as the Don's future wife, Severo ignored every one of them and pointed straight at the girl carrying a tray of sweets. Nerissa believed it was a cruel joke, but in that world, being chosen by a man like him could be far more dangerous than being rejected, and she was about to find out that some dreams cost far too much. Hi, I'm Lena. A special shout out to those of you watching Book 1 for free here on the My Stories platform, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Chapter 1, The Whisper in the Elevator. The tray weighed more than it should have, and I knew it was because of my exhaustion, not because of the sweets. 14 hours on my feet at the West Loop Bakery left any woman with a crooked spine and a crumpled pride, and I'd already given up pretending I was fine before the manager even shoved the order into my hands. Langham, presidential suite. Don't tremble in front of the rich, Nerissa. I smiled the trained smile of someone who needs the job and headed out the back door. The Chicago night cut my face with a wind that smelled of burnt snow and cold exhaust. I tightened my thin coat, which had once been my mother's, and crossed the sidewalk to the shop's delivery car, a sedan that creaked like an old joint. On the passenger seat, the white box with the golden bow, $30 of sweets, 7 hours of my paycheck. I'd learned not to calculate these things while driving, because the math always came out wrong in a way that ached in my chest. I started driving and tried not to think about the cramped room where Sasha was probably already lying on the top bunk of the bed, pretending to sleep so I wouldn't notice she'd skipped dinner again. I tried not to think about my mother's notebooks on the shelf, bound with masking tape, written in her handwriting still firm before the hospital. I tried not to think about anything that tasted like something lost. It was a skill I'd developed with practice, the same way you learn to brush your hair with one hand. It wasn't talent. It was survival. The Langham appeared on the corner like a poorly hidden jewel. Its facade had that discreet lighting that expensive places use to say they don't need to announce themselves. I parked out back, grabbed the box, and went in through the vendor's door, head down and badge on my chest. The security guard pointed me to the service elevator without looking up from his phone. I thanked him without looking. Inside the elevator, the silver mirror gave me back a crumpled version of myself, a bakery apron with a coffee stain near the pocket that I hadn't managed to get out, hair tied back with the elastic Sasha used for her braids, a pair of tired eyes that I'd learned not to stare at for too long, because they always carried an expression like a question, and unanswered questions were the kind of thing that didn't go with days like that one. It was inside that elevator, with the box propped against my hip, and the silver reflection of the wall giving me back that image, that I made the mistake that would split my life in two. The door opened on the 4th floor. He stepped in. I saw the shoe first, black, polished to the point where the light bent on it as if in a mirror. Then the suit trousers, pressed at the exact length, the dark jacket, without a single crease, the kind of fabric that doesn't wrinkle because it doesn't even allow itself to be touched carelessly. The narrow tie, held by a golden pin that I didn't need to understand to know cost more than everything I'd ever owned in my life. And the face. His face was the only thing in that elevator that didn't fit into decent words. A jaw that seemed drawn with a ruler. A mouth belonging to someone who doesn't smile for nothing. Dark, lowered eyes, as if he were calculating something inside his head, while the rest of the world thought he was just standing there. Black hair slicked back, with one loose strand at his right temple that he hadn't bothered to fix. A thin scar at the corner of his eyebrow, white against the skin, old enough to have become part of his face rather than an accident. He didn't look at me. He pressed the button for the 20th floor with the same ease as someone who does it 100 times a week. He returned to his position, hands crossed in front of his body, a signet ring on his middle finger with a letter intertwined in a leaf that I couldn't identify. From his wrist escaped a thread of cologne that was neither sweet nor fresh. It was something else. It was the kind of scent you don't forget and can't describe, like cold smoke and dark wood. The elevator went up. I held the box against my hip, afraid of smelling like a cheap kitchen near him, afraid of breathing too loudly. I even started counting the seconds in my head to distract myself from the absurd urge to look again. I got to 8. Between the 12th and 13th floor, the elevator stopped. It didn't shut off. It just stopped. The light flickered once, faintly, and the panel froze between the two numbers with a low hum, that was almost worse than total silence. My heart climbed into my throat. I don't have a phobia of enclosed spaces, but I do have a phobia of being trapped with people who can look at me and see everything I am. He didn't move. He didn't take his phone out of his pocket. He didn't sigh. He just stayed silent, as if it were part of his schedule, and he simply hadn't gotten to that item yet. "It usually jams," I said, more to myself than to him, in a voice that came out thinner than I wanted. "The elevator. They told me when I came in." He tilted his head slightly. That was the only reaction. He didn't answer, didn't turn his face, didn't offer any of the automatic courtesies people use to fill awkward silence. He simply processed what I'd said like someone registering a piece of information and filing it in its proper place. I looked at his reflection on the silver wall. It was worse than looking at him directly, because on the wall, distorted and silvered, he seemed even more unreachable, as if I were looking at an expensive painting in a museum I couldn't even enter, where the only thing they allowed me to do was walk by outside and look through the window. And it was at that moment, with the box of sweets weighing on my arm that had ached for hours, with the hum of the stalled elevator and his cologne taking up a space in the air it shouldn't have occupied, that I made the mistake. I whispered, without realizing I was whispering, "He's so handsome, and I'm just a broke virgin. He's my dream." It came out whole, before I had time to censor myself. It came out low, the way you talk to your own shadow when the night is too long and your guard drops on its own. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. The elevator unjammed right after. It rose to the 20th floor with a smoothness that seemed like irony. The bell chimed. The door opened. He stepped out first, in no hurry. He didn't turn his face. He didn't give me a single glance. He crossed the dark red carpeted hallway with the same calm of someone who has never been seen doing anything in a hurry and doesn't intend to start now, and I stayed there, inside the elevator, with the box of sweets at my hip and the absolute certainty that he hadn't heard. He couldn't have heard. I'd spoken too low. I'd spoken to myself. He was on the other side of the elevator, with that face that registered nothing. He hadn't heard. I repeated that 3 times as I walked down the hallway to the events wing, with the company name on the delivery form in crooked letters. I repeated it as I handed the box to the white-gloved maitre d', who received me with his face turned slightly to the side, as if it were polite to pretend I didn't smell like melted butter. I repeated it as he signed the receipt without looking at me. He hadn't heard. I was going to manage to get out of there, go back to the creaking sedan, drive home, lie down next to my cousin, and pretend that night had been like any other night of any other long week. That's when the maitre d' pointed me the wrong way. "To your right, dear. The service exit on this floor is under construction. Cross the ballroom through the back and go down by the main one. Cross the ballroom. The Italian elite won't notice you." He offered me a smile that was meant to be kind, and managed to be neither. "Keep your head down." I pressed the empty tray against my chest, as if it were armor, and crossed through the double doors. The ballroom swallowed me in a second. It was the size of half a city block, with high ceilings bearing frescoes of men in armor looking down with that expression old painters mistook for nobility, chandeliers dripping light like a crystal waterfall. The air smelled of white flowers, wax candles, and some expensive drink I wouldn't know how to name. Women dressed as though each one carried an entire country in her earrings. Men in black suits with golden pins just like the one belonging to the man who'd gotten into the elevator with me. I kept my head down and started skirting along the right, along the wall where the waiters circulated with trays of champagne. I almost made it. I almost crossed the entire ballroom without anyone noticing I existed. That's when the ballroom went silent. It wasn't an ordinary silence. It was a surgical silence, the kind that doesn't happen by accident, that only exists when everyone there knows exactly what's coming next and has rehearsed for weeks to stop breathing at the right second. I looked up by reflex. He was coming in through the main door, on the other side of the ballroom, the same jacket, the same slow stride of someone who's never run anywhere, the same ruler-drawn face that I was already going to carry in my memory against my will. Behind him, 2 men in dark suits walk 3 steps back, like bodyguards who know their place with surgical precision. Somewhere ahead, near an interior staircase, a woman in a blood-red dress adjusted herself slightly, lifting her chin the way someone does when they already imagine themselves chosen. Her black hair fell down to her bare back. She was exactly the kind of woman men from that floor chose, and she knew it the same way I knew the difference between well-worked dough and dough that's going to collapse. I understood, in a single second, what was happening there. It wasn't a ball. It was a choosing, and the man from the elevator was the one who was going to choose. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the ballroom. I pressed the tray harder against my chest and took 2 steps back, trying to dissolve into the wall, to become part of the golden wallpaper, or anything else that had no name and no story to tell. He crossed the red carpet toward the center of the ballroom. He didn't look at the woman in red. He didn't look at any of the other heiresses scattered in calculated poses around the room. He didn't look at anyone. He crossed the entire ballroom, with that slow stride of someone who knows no one will dare interrupt, and stopped. He stopped in front of me, empty tray, trembling hands, apron stained with coffee, Sasha's elastic in my hair. The entire ballroom turned its head in my direction like a single creature. I looked up, and it was in that second, that exact second, that I looked for the first time, truly, into the face of the man from the elevator. His eyes were darker than they'd seemed up there, and they carried inside them something I couldn't name immediately, but that reached me like heat in my chest before any organized thought. There was one corner of his mouth raised by a millimeter, in a way that said, without saying, that he'd heard every syllable of my whisper, every syllable, and he hadn't forgotten any of them. "This one," he said, without turning his face to anyone. His voice was deep, low, and it cut through the ballroom like a knife through fine cloth. "Is the woman I chose." Chapter 2. The Price of Being Chosen. The ballroom went so silent that I heard my own breath break in the middle of my chest. The woman in blood red near the staircase closed her hand around the railing so hard that her knuckles went white. Behind her, a man too tall and too handsome, with the same face as hers, stopped bringing his glass to his lips. And in one corner, leaning against a column like someone just passing through, an older gentleman with graying hair held an untouched glass of whiskey and watched me with the patience of someone waiting for the next move of a chess piece. I swallowed hard. "You're mistaken," I murmured. He extended his hand in my direction, not as a request, as a notice. "I'm not." I looked at his hand, broad, with long fingers, the signet ring on his middle finger. I looked again at his face. I looked at my own empty tray. Somewhere in the ballroom, a glass fell on the carpet without breaking. "You don't even know my name." Nerissa Cole. It was as if he'd taken the air from my lungs and given it back empty. I hadn't said my name at any point. The badge on my chest was turned inward against the apron. "How?" "The maître d', 5 minutes ago." His hand stayed extended, patient. "Come with me." "Not here." I looked around. 100 faces watching me with a mix of curiosity and contempt. I'd seen my whole life, only now multiplied by 1,000. There was no running. There was no disappearing. There was putting my hand in his and crossing through the nearest side door, or there was standing planted there until someone dragged me out. I put my hand in his. It wasn't surrender. It was calculation. His hand was warm, dry, firm. It closed around mine the way you close a deal. He led me down the side hallway. The 2 men who had come in behind him stepped out of our path like curtains. The woman in red cut me with a look of someone who wanted to see me dead without staining her dress. I held the tray with my free hand and tried not to trip. The side door opened to a hallway with high ceilings, bronze light fixtures, and the sound of the party muffled by the wall. He didn't let go of me until after the door closed. I took 2 steps back. "What was that?" "Work," he answered. "Work?" I laughed. A short laugh came out, humorless, the kind that hurts the throat of the one laughing. "You choose people the way you choose expensive wine." The corner of his mouth rose by a millimeter for the 2nd time that night. No, because that's exactly what it looked like. Expensive wine. You taste first. I felt the blood rush to my ears. I opened my mouth to answer, closed it, opened it again. "You heard," I said, and my voice came out lower, firmer than I expected. "In the elevator. I heard. And you found it funny." "No." "Then what?" He looked at me in silence for 2 seconds. His eyes had something on the other side of the darkness that I couldn't read. I found it true. I lost my breath. It wasn't what he said. It was how he said it. Without irony, without flirtation, without that oily voice of a rich man amused by a poor woman. It was like someone registering a fact. I pressed the tray against my chest. "I'm leaving." "No, you're not." "I am. Nerissa." He said my name slowly, and it was as if each syllable carried weight. "If you walk out that door alone right now, someone's going to try to hurt you before you reach the parking lot." I looked at him. "You're threatening me." "I'm warning you. There's a difference." "Why?" I swallowed. Why would anyone want to hurt me? "Because what I did in there just turned you into someone who shifts territories." He pointed at the door. That ballroom has 3 families who need this alliance not to happen. You're the reason now. Leave alone. And tomorrow, you don't wake up. I wanted to laugh again. I wanted to say that was cheap cinema, rich man manipulation, a lie to keep me there with him. But there was something in the way he spoke that didn't allow for laughter. I don't believe it. You don't have to believe it. He took a step back and cleared the path to the door with a gesture. The choice is yours. I stood still for 3 seconds. Then I walked to the door. I crossed the hallway, crossed the service lobby, crossed the cargo elevator without running into anyone. When the doors opened in the underground parking lot, the freezing garage air hit my face with the smell of oil and damp concrete. The bakery sedan was at the end of the row of parking spaces, near a column painted with peeling yellow paint. I started walking. It was on the 3rd step that I saw it. The reflections. The garage had a row of black limousines parked in reserved spaces, and the side windows of one of them, polished like a mirror, gave back what was happening behind me. 2 men, in suits. They'd come out of the elevator 3 seconds after me, and were crossing the garage at the same pace as my steps, keeping a distance of about 15 meters. My heart raced. I didn't speed up. I'd learned my whole life that a woman who speeds up becomes prey before the chase even begins. I kept walking at the same pace, with the tray against my chest, and the box of complimentary sweets the maître d' had shoved into my hands on the way out. I got close to the yellow column. The men covered half the distance. I saw in the reflection that the one on the right brought his hand to his waist. I saw the handle of something black under his jacket. I thought fast. I let my foot drop to the ground like someone who'd just tripped. The box of sweets slipped from my hands before I could pretend to hold it. It fell on the concrete with a muffled thud, and 4 dozen macarons rolled in every direction, scattering pink, green, and yellow over the dirty gray of the garage. "Oh my God!" I said loudly, and crouched as if to gather them. The footsteps behind me hesitated. That was all I needed. I spun on my heels and bolted in the opposite direction, heading back to the elevator. The men reacted too late. When I pressed the button, I heard one of them curse under his breath. The door opened. I stepped in. I pressed the ground floor button 3 times in a row. The door closed. I leaned against the elevator wall with cold sweat running down my back beneath the thin coat. The silver reflection gave me back a woman I barely recognized, with hair escaping its bun and eyes too wide. The door opened on the ground floor. He was standing in front of the elevator, arms crossed, jacket aligned, eyes on me like someone who'd already expected it. "Come," he said, and extended his hand again. This time I took it without thinking. He led me through his private elevator, with a card reader and a single button. We rode up in silence to the highest floor of the hotel. The presidential suite was the size of my entire apartment multiplied by 5. A floor-to-ceiling panoramic window covering all of Chicago from above. The chandelier off, golden lamps lit. He pointed me to a couch. "Sit." I sat without arguing, because my legs weren't arguing about anything. "Severo Belandi," he said, from the other side of the table. "That's my full name. I run what my family has been building in Chicago for 40 years. Don't ask me what my family builds. You don't want to know today." I didn't ask. "Those 2 men downstairs work for the Velasco family," he continued. "The woman in red is Mora Velasco. Her brother, Orfeo, was beside her. They both expected the marriage to be announced tonight. I undid that when I pointed at you. You undid it because of a whisper. I undid it because of the whisper." He didn't deny it. "But the explanation is for another day. Tonight it's just survival." A side door opened. A man came in. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark suit, closed features, short hair at the nape. His eyes assessed me in half a second and went back to Severo. "Dante Russo," Severo said. "The only man I trust. He'll take care of you when I'm not watching." Dante tilted his head to me without smiling. "Principessa. Don't call me that, please. Ma'am." "Worse." The corner of Dante's mouth rose a millimeter. Severo cut the joke off with a look. "I have a proposal," Severo said, and sat down facing me. "You pretend to be the chosen one for a few weeks. You appear with me in public when I need it. You live in my house. You learn to move in my world. And in return, I pay everything you owe. I protect your cousin Sasha. And when this is over, I finance your bakery, in your name, without mine on any part of it." I didn't ask how he knew about Sasha. I didn't ask how he knew about the bakery. Some things, I was beginning to understand, were part of what he was. "I have one condition. Tell me. No one touches my life without me knowing why." I held his gaze. "Not even you. If something happens to me, on my street, in my family, at my work, I want to know. Before, not after. Severo looked at me in silence for 3 seconds. Or agreed. Promise. I don't break promises, Nerissa. And for the first time that night, I believed something that man said. Dante left the room without anyone needing to ask. The door closed behind him with a discreet click. I stood up slowly and went to the panoramic window. Chicago stretched out below us like a circuit of yellow and white lights, with Lake Michigan in the background, dark as ink. A few hours earlier, I'd been in a creaking car with a box of macarons on the passenger seat, with 7 hours of pay in my lap, heading back to a room shared with a cousin who skipped dinner. A few hours earlier, I was a small woman. Now I was a woman carrying the name of a war I didn't even know existed. I felt Severo approach behind me. He didn't get too close. He stopped at the exact distance where you could feel the heat without the touch. "You're trembling," he said quietly. "I am. It'll pass. Are you sure?" He didn't answer right away. I looked at his reflection in the panoramic glass, and for a second, under the yellow light of the streets below, he seemed less like a Mafia boss and more like a man who knew exactly what it was to hear someone whisper that he was a dream, and to discover, in that same second, that no one had ever said that about him out loud. "No," he said, finally, "I'm not." I closed my eyes for half a second. When I opened them, I saw my own reflection beside his in the glass, with all of Chicago behind us, and I understood my life had just broken in two. Chapter 3: Rules of a Dangerous House. Morning came like a betrayal. I wanted it to take its time, for the sun to respect the size of the blow I'd taken the night before, but the light invaded the presidential suite at the Langham without ceremony, and I understood that the world wasn't going to give me a break just because I hadn't slept. Dante appeared at the door at 8 on the dot, dressed in black, hands in his coat pockets, with that expression of someone who'd already had 3 coffees and considered life at least twice before greeting me. "Good morning, Principessa," he said, and I swore on my mother's name that he'd found a way to make that word sound like a joke and a threat at the same time. "The car's ready. Do you always wake up like this?" I asked, gripping the strap of the small bag they'd left on the armchair. "Like what?" "Like someone who already gave up on the world before coffee." He looked at me for a second and almost smiled. Almost. The corner of his mouth rose 0.5 millimeter and returned to place, as if even his laughter needed the dawn's permission. "You're going to like Lincoln Park," was all he said. I wasn't going to like anything, and we both knew it, but I asked to stop by my street first. I needed to see Sasha. I needed my mother's notebooks. I needed a minute of the smell of my apartment before walking into a place where, apparently, I was going to have to learn to smile with a ruler at my back. Dante nodded and crossed Chicago in silence, the big car gliding through the narrow streets, as if the asphalt were silk. When we stopped in front of the building, he got out first, opened the door, looked both ways down the street in a way that made me feel how much my world had changed in less than 12 hours. Sasha opened the door with the face of someone who still thought it was a prank. "You're wearing heels," she said. "Can you hate heels?" "I hate a lot of things today, Sasha." She looked me up and down, registered Dante standing in the hallway, registered the coat that wasn't mine, registered the bag that was too expensive for the woman she knew. "What a mess you've made," she murmured, and her tone was neither fear nor pity. It was that of someone who just accepted she was going to have to ride this out with me to the end. I walked into the cramped room in 3 steps. The window barely opened. The blanket had a hole I'd been pretending not to see for months. The fan on the floor was full of dust, and on the shelf, leaning in the corner, 3 hardcover notebooks, slightly cracked at the edges, with my mother's handwriting still alive inside. I picked up all 3 with both hands, the way you hold a newborn child. "It's all going to work out," Sasha said, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. "Look at me, Nerissa. It's all going to work out. You don't even know what's happening. I know enough. I saw the face of the guy in black. I saw your face," she breathed. "It's going to work out because you don't know how to lose. You only know how to reinvent yourself while losing." I swallowed hard and hugged her tight, with the notebooks pressed between our 2 bodies, and for 2 seconds I wasn't any Dawn's chosen one. I was just Sasha Cole's older cousin again. When I came out, Dante took the notebooks from my hands with a reverence that surprised me. He held all 3 as if they were vault documents, placed them on the back seat of the car carefully, and only then opened the door for me. I stepped inside the vehicle and inside another life at the same time. The Blandy mansion didn't prepare me for myself. I'd seen photos of big houses in magazines. I'd delivered sweets to a small mansion party in the suburbs, but Lincoln Park in winter surrounded me like the set of an old movie. Light stone walls, dry ivy climbing the facade, dark iron gates that opened silently when the car approached. Livia Hart was waiting for me on the entrance staircase. Gray dress, gray hair tied back, hands crossed at her waist, and an expression I could only describe later, maternal without being sweet, as if she'd decided, without consulting me, that I was going to be cared for, but that caring didn't mean making things easy. "Miss Cole," she said. "I'm Livia, the housekeeper. Mr. Belandi hasn't returned yet. I'll take you to your suite. You can call me Nerissa." She stopped halfway up the first flight of stairs, turned her body halfway back, and looked at me with something that looked a lot like approval. "I will," she answered, "but only inside the house. In a formal room, you're Miss Cole until further notice. And who gives the further notice? You yourself, when you learn to give it." I followed her down the hallway with thick carpet, counting doors with my eyes, registering candelabras, registering an interior staircase of light marble that descended to a floor I hadn't yet seen. The suite was the size of my entire apartment. A huge window onto the garden, a 4-poster bed, an antique writing desk in the corner that I fell in love with instantly because it had room for 2 open notebooks side by side. "You're going to need this," Livia said, placing a leather planner on top of the desk. "Schedules, routines, names, memorize them. Mr. Belandi doesn't like to repeat himself. Does he usually repeat anything? No." And she left, letting the silence do her work. The next morning's breakfast was the first table I shared with Severo inside that house. A formal dining room, high ceilings, 3 windows in the back, a white tablecloth, too much silverware. He was already seated when I came in. Dark suit, gray tie, the signet ring with the B intertwined in an olive leaf on the middle finger of his right hand. He looked up at me, examined my mother's notebooks that I insisted on bringing down with the 3rd one, and didn't say good morning. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "No." "Good." "Why good?" "Whoever sleeps too much here makes mistakes early." I sat in the chair to his right, opened the napkin in my lap, and held back a laugh for the first time. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a laugh of exhaustion. It was a, "if I don't laugh now, I'm going to throw this cup at someone" laugh. "Good morning, Mr. Belandi," I said, with the most polite intonation I could muster. "I hope you slept enough not to make mistakes." He held the cup of black coffee with his left hand, and for half a second I saw the corner of his mouth rise. It wasn't a smile. It was a confirmation. "Severo," he said. "Inside the house." "Severo," I repeated, and the word felt strange in my mouth, as if it belonged to another person I was going to have to learn to be. It was at that moment that Ettore came in. I recognized him without needing an introduction because the air changed. It became half a degree colder, half a degree more cordial, half a degree less trustworthy. Short-cut graying hair, anthracite suit, silk handkerchief in his pocket. He greeted me with a nod and came to the chair across from mine with the same calm of someone walking into a jury room knowing they're going to win. "Nerissa," he said, prolonging the E of my name 1/10 of a second longer than necessary. "How nice to finally meet you. Severo has been quite discreet." Severo has been discreet his whole life. "True," he smiled at me. "You work in a bakery, I hear." "Worked. And the bakery is on which street exactly?" The question came wrapped in sugar. It was a question that seemed polite and was a question probing for an address, a schedule, a habit. I looked at him and answered with the name of a street that existed 2 blocks before the right street. Severo didn't correct me. Ettore registered it, smiled again, drank his coffee. That night, lying in the enormous bed, I wrote a single sentence in my mother's notebook. In a corner, "The uncle asks one thing too many." The days passed with a silent ferocity. Livia taught me to use 3 pieces of silverware at the same time without making noise. She taught me to enter a room looking at the farthest wall, never at the floor. She taught me to say thank you in 4 different ways, each with a weight. I learned fast because I had no choice, and because there's a stubbornness in me that lights up when someone implies I won't manage. On the 3rd day, Mora Velasco showed up for a courtesy lunch. Pearl gray dress, hair tied back, the smile of someone who'd already practiced humiliation in the mirror. She sat across from me and took 13 seconds to take aim. "Are you adjusting, Nerissa?" she asked. And I imagine it must be difficult, after so many years serving sweets on a tray. I smiled at her. It was a small smile, trained, freshly learned from Livia. "I am," I answered. "You must be adjusting too." after so many years waiting for someone to choose your tray. Livia, standing behind my chair holding the water pitcher, turned her face to the right and coughed once. It was the most polite cough I'd heard in my life. Mora blinked 3 times in a row, lost half a second, regained control. Severo, seated at the head, didn't move a muscle in his face, but his right hand turned the signet ring half a turn on his little finger. I interpreted that as applause, because I was already beginning to learn to read him. Sasha came to lunch the next day. It was the first time I laughed for real inside that mansion. She crossed the hall the way you enter a museum, stopped in front of the butler in a white coat, and asked if he was an extra in a movie, or if that was a genuine uniform. The butler didn't know how to answer. Sasha declared he was an actor and ordered him to be natural. I cried laughing behind my napkin. Livia had to leave the room to laugh. In the early hours of the 5th day, I couldn't sleep. My mother's notebooks were open on the desk, 3 pistachio brigadeiro recipes marked with pink tape, and I lay there with my eyes on the ceiling counting invisible cracks until I was sure no one else was awake. I put the robe over my nightgown, went down the stairs carefully, barefoot, and went by inertia, without thinking of anything, toward the one room in that house I still hadn't entered alone, the kitchen. The exhaust hood light was on. Severo was standing in front of the stove, white shirt open at the collar, sleeves rolled up to the elbow, stirring the water in the Italian coffee maker with a patience I hadn't seen in him at any other hour of the day. There were 2 small cups on the marble counter. Not 1. 2. He heard me arrive and didn't turn around. "Sit," he said, quietly. I sat at the counter, with my right foot swinging in the air, and stayed silent. It was a different silence. It wasn't the silence of the formal dining room, nor the silence of the mansion's hallways. It was the silence of a kitchen at 3 in the morning, with a man stirring coffee like someone praying. He poured the 2 cups. He pushed one in my direction without looking at me. He took a sip of his, closed his eyes for half a second, opened them again. When he spoke, it was to the wall, not to me. "My brother liked it with more water. I like it with less. I can never make it just like his." That was all he said. He didn't elaborate. He didn't explain. He didn't look at me. I held the cup with both hands and felt the warmth rise through my fingers. His head was slightly bowed, his right hand turning the signet ring half a turn again, and for a second, in that enormous kitchen of white marble and noisy exhaust hood, I saw the man 2 men had tried to hurt me because of. I saw the crack. I didn't look at myself in the mirror, but I felt my face change. It was the first time I looked at Severo Belandi without any armor, and it was the first time I understood in that instant that anyone in that house had seen the man behind the Don. I didn't say anything. I drank the coffee. He drank the coffee. And we stayed there, in silence, until the coffee maker cooled, the exhaust hood light hummed, and the antique hallway clock struck 4 in the morning. When I went up to the suite, with the empty cup still warm between my hands, I understood the thing that was going to change everything from then on. I was the only person in that house who had seen the crack, and a crack, I knew very well, was the exact place where water gets in. Chapter 4. Hot Syrup and an Address Sent. Almost a week passed. I counted the days in Livia's leather planner like someone counting coins on a bank table. 2 meals a day with Severo, 3 formal dinners, 4 hallway conversations with Ettore that always ended with one more question than necessary. My mother's notebooks went to the suite's writing desk, and each night, before sleeping, I'd open one of them and pretend I was home. It worked for 10 minutes. Then it passed. On Friday morning, I asked to see Sasha at work. It wasn't an easy thing to ask. It was at our West Loop bakery, 3 blocks from my old apartment, inside a city where 2 men had tried to follow me a week before. Severo received the request in the library, seated in the dark leather armchair, with shoulders too broad for it and the ring turning on his finger. "No," he said. "When I didn't ask for your opinion? You're asking now. I'm informing you." He looked at me for a long time. There was no anger in his eyes. There was calculation. I saw every possibility pass through his head in sequence, as if he were making an internal list. "Dante takes you," he said, finally, "and you stay no more than an hour. And you go in through the back." "Why through the back?" "Because out front I can't cover you." "Severo, through the back, Nerissa." His voice dropped half a tone. "Or else we stay in this library all morning." I gave in because it was reasonable. I gave in also because the way he turned the ring half a turn when he said, cover reminded me of the cup of coffee in the early morning. I wasn't going to test him on a matter that involved my cousin's life. Dante showed up half an hour later with that face of someone who'd had one more coffee and given up on one more piece of the world. Black coat, tense shoulders, hands in his pockets. He looked me up and down and made a point of commenting. Shoes without heels. Principessa. Good. If we run, I'd rather you make it. Why would we run? We're never going to run. I just prefer the possibility. He opened the car door. Get in. The drive to West Loop was done in 20 minutes of silence. Dante drove with both hands on the wheel and his eyes on the rearview mirrors, as if they were a third person in the conversation. When we stopped in the alley behind the bakery, he got out first, walked to the end of the alley, came back, opened the door for me, and only then made that small nod that meant go in. Sasha was behind the stainless steel counter in the back, apron tied at her waist, hair in a crooked bun, hands on her hips. Look who arrived in an armored car, she said, too loudly. The Princess of Lincoln Park. Sasha. Is the shirt new? It's borrowed. From whom? From the shirt's owner. She laughed, shook her head, crossed the small kitchen in 3 steps, and hugged me so tight that I felt my mother's notebooks at my waist even though they weren't with me. I stayed half a minute with my face buried in her shoulder. It was the closest thing to home I'd felt in 7 days. The bakery smelled of sugar syrup burning on the 2-burner stove in the corner. Sasha had forgotten the pot. She cursed, ran back, stirred the syrup with the wooden spoon, let out a creative swear about the life of a counter clerk, and tossed me an apron. Since you're here, help. I came to visit. You came fleeing. But okay. Stir this syrup. I took the spoon and stood in front of the stove. The syrup was at the right point of bubbling, light brown, with that smell of slight burning that my mother called the soul of the sweet. I stirred slowly, in circles, and for 2 minutes I was just a girl from West Loop behind a counter. The back doorbell rang. 2 short rings. Sasha went to answer with the apron still on her chest. I kept stirring the syrup because the sound was that of a delivery person, and delivery people we answered without ceremony. But when she came back to the kitchen, she was walking too fast, with the wrong color on her face. There are 2 men out front asking for you, she said, in a low voice. For me. They said your name. I looked at the wooden spoon in my hand. I looked at the syrup. I looked at Sasha. And in 3 seconds my head did something I didn't know I could do. It divided the problem into pieces and organized the pieces in order. Go out the street door, I said to her. Now. Don't argue. Cross to the bakery on the other side. Ask Mrs. Tsira to let you in the back. Narissa. Sasha. Go. She went. She saw my face and went without asking. It was the first time in her life she obeyed me on the first try, and I mentally thanked all the saints my mother knew. The 2 men entered the kitchen without asking permission. The one in front I recognized by his build, right shoulder higher, thick neck, leather jacket. He was one of the men from the Langham's parking lot. The other I didn't know. Thin, blue jacket, right hand in his pocket. They stopped 2 meters from the stove, and the one in front opened a smile that had little practice. Miss Cole, he said. Mr. Velasco would like a word. Mr. Velasco is going to have to take a number. He took half a step forward. I stirred the wooden spoon in the syrup. Slowly, in a circle. The phone was tucked in the waistband of my pants, under the apron, and Severo had programmed the location to send with a long press of the side button. I needed 3 seconds to press it. I pretended to feel dizzy. It was a feat. I closed my eyes half a millimeter, let my body fall forward, gripped the pot's handle as if I needed support. The one in front lunged to grab me, the idiotic instinct of someone who still thinks women faint cleanly, and I, with the pot's handle in my hand, turned my wrist back and poured the syrup onto his hand. The scream came before the smell. It was a smell of skin and sugar mixed that I never forgot. He fell backward, slapping his hand against his apron. The other one took a step in my direction, and I already had my other hand inside the apron pocket holding the phone. I pressed the button, counted to 2, released. Get out of here, I said to the thin one, in a voice that didn't seem like mine. Get out of here or I throw the rest. The pot still had enough syrup to make a nasty case. He looked at me, looked at his companion fallen and screaming, looked at the front door, and I saw the calculation on his face. It was a short calculation. He backed off, grabbed his friend's jacket, dragged the big man by the sleeve, and left through the back door, banging his shoulder on the doorframe. I stood there with the pot still in my hand, until I heard their car's tires squeal 2 blocks ahead. Dante came running through the street door 17 seconds later. He looked at me. looked at the pot, looked at the syrup on the floor, and I saw his broad shoulders drop 2 centimeters. It was the closest thing to relief I'd seen in him all week. "Principessa," he said, breathless. "You have 5 minutes before Severo arrives. Drink some water." Severo arrived in 4 minutes. He came in through the street door without saying a word, crossed the bakery floor, crossed the kitchen, and stopped in front of me. His coat was open, his tie crooked. I'd never seen his tie crooked. He looked me up and down, registered the pot on the counter, registered the syrup on the floor, registered Sasha coming in behind him, white as paper. He didn't speak. He just extended his right hand. I put the wooden spoon in his hand. I don't know why I did that. It was instinct. He held the spoon as if it were the most important thing in that kitchen, and stood in front of me for 2 whole seconds, without saying anything. "I'm fine," I said. "I know." I pressed the button. "I know. Severo, sit." I sat on the stainless steel stool. He crouched in front of me, rested the wooden spoon on the counter, and took my 2 hands with both of his. It was the first time he'd touched me since the night of the ballroom. His hands were cold. Mine were trembling. I hadn't noticed they were trembling until he held them. "You did everything right," he said, quietly. You didn't have to do it. I had to." He shook his head once. He didn't argue. Dante took Sasha to a hotel that same afternoon. 3 rooms with a connecting door. Security in the hallway. I kissed my cousin's forehead before she got in the car and promised I'd call every day. She looked at me and said she'd rather I threw syrup on people more often, because I looked pretty when angry. I cried, laughing in the alley. The drive back to Lincoln Park was done in silence. Severo drove, this time, with Dante in the passenger seat. His right hand stayed on the gear shift, and I saw, from the back seat, the slight tremor. He had felt fear, not fear of losing a pawn, fear of losing me. I leaned forward, at the Halstead traffic light, put my hand over his, and said nothing. He turned his hand up, without taking his eyes off the traffic, and held my fingers. We stayed like that for 6 blocks. Dante looked out the window the whole time, pretending he was seeing Chicago for the first time. The mansion received us with the light already fading. Livia was in the hall with a warm towel in her hands, and a face that mixed prayer and scolding. She wrapped me in the towel without saying anything, and pushed me toward the stairs with the gentleness of someone pushing a daughter to bed. I was already halfway down the West Wing hallway when Ettore appeared at the bend. Anthracite suit, silk handkerchief, and an expression of concern that I, 7 days earlier, would have believed. He approached with both hands open, like someone offering consolation. "Nerissa," he said, prolonging my name with the same 1/10 of a second as always. "What a terrible afternoon. I just heard, at the bakery in the back, wasn't it?" I stopped. I looked at him. I hadn't told anyone in that house, before leaving in the morning, that I was going to enter through the back. Severo had decided in the library. Dante had been told afterward, and I hadn't seen Ettore at any point between the library and the car. "Yes," I answered, slowly. "Through the back." Thank goodness Dante was nearby. He touched my elbow with 2 fingers. "Would you like some tea? I'll ask Livia to bring it." "I'm going to go up, Uncle." "Thank you. Of course. Rest." He smiled at me. It was a gentle smile. I smiled back. It was a smile trained by Livia. When I closed the suite door and leaned against it, with the warm towel still on my shoulders and my hand still remembering the tremor of Severo's hand, I opened my mother's notebook on the writing desk and wrote a new line. Beneath the first, the uncle knew I was going to enter through the back. Severo was downstairs, in the library, with his tie crooked and his hand trembling from a scare that had nearly cost me my life. I thought about going down. I thought about showing the notebook. I thought about telling. I didn't go down. I turned off the desk light, held the notebook against my chest, and sat on the bed, in the dark, listening to the antique hallway clock strike 10 at night. I was going to uncover one more layer on my own before dropping a bomb on the Don's table. It was what my mother would have done. It was what I was going to do. And somewhere in that mansion, a man in an anthracite suit was finishing his dinner, smiling at Livia, asking one thing too many. Chapter 5, The Exposure. The early hours came in through my bedroom window before sleep. I'd already given up pretending I'd sleep, so I got up barefoot, took my mother's notebook, and went down the service stairs without making a sound. The house in Lincoln Park slept in that kind of silence that seemed to breathe, and I knew exactly where he'd be. The kitchen was lit only by the lamp over the counter. Severo was already there, with his back to the door, his white shirt a bit wrinkled and his cuffs open. 2 cups waited beside the coffee maker, washed and dried, as if he'd put the second one on the counter before even hearing my steps. "You sleep less and less," I said, sitting on my usual stool. "You come down earlier and earlier." He turned his face enough for me to see the corner of his mouth. "And we should sync our clocks, or stop pretending we sleep." He pushed the cup in my direction. The coffee was black and hot, the way he'd learned to make it for his brother. I held the porcelain with both hands. "More water, right?" Severo looked at me. He didn't answer right away. He just tilted his face, as if I'd said something in a language he hadn't expected to hear in that kitchen. "You remembered." "I remember everything you say just once." He rested his hands on the counter, and for an instant, I saw his entire shoulder position relax a millimeter. Severo Belandi was a man who controlled every centimeter of his own body. That millimeter was an involuntary gift. "He was 12 when he taught me to strain it," he said quietly. "He used to say coffee that was too strong was an insult. I've never told that to anyone in the house. I won't tell." "I know." I opened my mother's notebook on the counter, not to read it, just for him to see. Severo looked at the cloth cover, at the old butter stains that not even soap removed, at the newspaper clipping held with a paper clip that she always glued in whenever she learned a new technique. For some reason, showing that notebook hurt more than showing a bare shoulder. "She was the one who sang while she stirred the cream," I said. "I don't know how to sing, so I stir in silence and it feels like betrayal." "It isn't." He touched the edge of the notebook with a single finger, as if the thing might tear. "The recipe is hers. The hand is yours. Both things exist at the same time. You speak like someone who lost someone and discovered how to keep going. I speak like someone who's still discovering." I drank the coffee. He drank the coffee. Neither of us needed another word for some time. It was strange to share silence with a man all of Chicago feared. Stranger still to realize that silence didn't weigh. It held. "Severo. Tomorrow you're going to expose Mora and Orfeo before the families." "I am. And Ettore is going to be there." He looked up. They weren't a Don's eyes. They were the eyes of a man who understood I wasn't asking for nothing. "Why?" I thought about telling everything. The open notebook between us almost forced me to. But the note I'd made days earlier, the uncle knew I was going to enter through the back, was still too small to accuse a name from inside that house before the meeting that would decide the entire alliance. If I spoke now, he'd walk into the ballroom with a divided mind, and I needed him whole. "Because I want to be in the room," I said instead. "Standing behind you, not hidden in a hallway." Severo looked at me for a long time. I didn't look away. "You know what they'll say if you walk into that room? They'll say I had no place there." I shrugged. "They already said worse in the hotel ballroom. I survived with an empty tray. I'll survive with an empty hand too." He let the air out through his nose, slowly. It wasn't laughter. It was contained surrender. "You'll be standing behind me." Agreed. He extended his hand over the counter, with his palm turned up. He didn't pull. He didn't ask. He just offered. I rested mine on top without thinking. His fingers closed slowly over mine. It was the second time those hands had touched me without urgency. The first had been in the car, after the syrup. That night, in the empty kitchen. I understood that maybe it would be the 3rd, the 4th, the 20th, and each one would say the same thing. "It's going to work out," I whispered. "You have no way of knowing. I know enough." He squeezed my hand a little more. Then he let go. I went up the service stairs when the sky began to turn gray. I lay down without changing. I didn't sleep. I thought about myself beside the dawn of Chicago, dressed for a room no woman entered without permission, and realized it wasn't fear gripping my chest. It was certainty. I knew I'd been born to enter. And the west wing of the mansion was opened before 9. A long table, 12 high-backed chairs, a chandelier that had once been in a palace somewhere I wouldn't be able to point to. Dante positioned the men in the corners, without saying a word. Livia looked me up and down, adjusted the collar of my black blouse, and said, quietly, "Head straight, hands still. If you smile, smile closed-mouthed." "Yes, ma'am," she almost laughed. The families arrived in hierarchical order. The Velascos came in last. Mora wore pearl gray today, hair tied back, without the red she'd worn at the Langham like a banner. Orfeo seemed smaller without the ballroom to frame him. Ettore had been in the room since 8, serving coffee to the older bosses with his usual cordiality. When he saw me come in behind Severo, he raised his cup in salute. I didn't lower my gaze. Severo sat at the head. I stayed standing, 2 steps behind, my right hand on the back of his chair as Livia had taught me in the morning without saying it in words. Dante stayed on the opposite wall, arms crossed. Severo didn't beat around the bush. I called this meeting to close a matter that grew behind the family's backs. The room closed. He opened a folder. He didn't speak. He just pushed 3 photographs to the middle of the table. Orfeo in the Langhams underground parking lot. Orfeo getting out of a car behind my bakery. Orfeo receiving an envelope from a man I didn't know but Severo did. An attempted kidnapping of a woman under my protection, he said, still quietly. On 2 occasions, ordered by this table, received by that seat. He pointed at Orfeo with his chin, without looking. Orfeo opened his mouth. Dante advanced half a step. Orfeo closed his mouth. Mora tried to speak first. She managed half a word. Severo, I didn't. You tried, Dante cut in, without moving the rest of his body, to buy one of my men to switch the name of the chosen one on the night of the ball. The man is alive because he told me. You're alive because I find it a waste to shoot on a Sunday morning. It was Dante's only sentence in the entire meeting. It was enough. The Velasco patriarch, the old man who kept the surname standing, closed his eyes for 2 seconds. When he opened them, he was another man. Orfeo will surrender himself to his own family, he said, in the dry voice of someone who'd lost a son before even getting up from his chair. Compensation will be discussed with the Belandi house by the end of the week. Mora returns to Miami tomorrow. Severo tilted his head. Agreed. And then, without changing his tone, he said what the whole room expected, and what none of them expected in the same way. There will be no political marriage. Not with Velasco. Not with any other table. He turned his head half a degree toward me, without needing to look. Nerissa Cole is under the protection of the Belandi family. Whoever touches her answers to me before they answer to God. The silence lasted 3 seconds. The older bosses bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Not to me. To his name. It was the same gesture. Ettore applauded. He clapped twice, in a slow rhythm, and said, with that smile I already knew millimeter by millimeter, a man's decision, the pride of the blood. He clapped a 3rd time, and it was the 3rd one that scratched me from the inside, because a man who had just watched his nephew refuse an alliance that he himself, as advisor, had orchestrated over months, does not clap 3 times. He claps once, out of respect, out of restraint, or none at all, and he watches. 3 was performance. I filed it away. Mora left without looking at me. Orfeo left escorted by 2 men of his own blood. The patriarchs left in reverse order of their entrance. Ettore was the last to rise and the only one who stopped beside my high-backed chair. You conducted the silence well, he said. That's rare. I learned to conduct a tray first, I answered, without moving my chin. Silence is lighter. He laughed. He laughed for real. Severo chose well. He left without waiting for an answer. Dante closed the door. Severo stayed seated for a moment, hands on the folder. I went around the chair, sat in the one that had been empty all night, and rested my hand over his. You did everything right, I said. He turned his palm up without looking at me. I did what I had to do. The right thing. I don't even know anymore. I know. The library at night had low light and the smell of cedar. Severo was in the dark leather armchair with an untouched glass in his hand. I closed the door behind me and stood in front of him. I'm going to stay, I said. He didn't lift his head right away. You can leave tomorrow. The money's been in your account since the afternoon of the meeting. The bakery has been deeded in your name since Thursday. You don't owe me any pretending. I know. I swallowed hard. That's why I'm staying. He lifted his face then. His eyes seemed darker than in the morning. Why? Because you really chose me in the elevator. Severo breathed deeply. He didn't dodge the question. Because you whispered, he's my dream, without knowing who I was. The voice came low, without ornament. It's been a long time since anyone called me anything that wasn't Dawn. You called me a dream in a stalled elevator. I'd already decided before the door opened. I didn't cry. Almost. I didn't get there. So we ended up together because of a whisper. We ended up together because you confirmed every word of it afterward. He set the glass on the table, slowly. I chose you by poetic mistake. You choose me by choice. It's not the same thing. It isn't. And even so. I drew closer. I stopped a step away from him. He didn't extend his hand. Neither did I. That moment didn't call for touch. It called for a witness. I'm staying, I repeated. Not for the money, for the choice. Severo closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, he was the man from the kitchen, not the Dawn from the meeting. the one who measured coffee with more water. Then, stay. I left the library without turning my back. I went up the service stairs thinking about the hand clapped 3 times, the uncle's smile, the applause that was too long. I thought about telling now, while it was still hot. I decided to wait for morning. It was the last easy silence I'd have for 6 months. Chapter 6. Coffee and Silence. The service stairs were dark when we left the library side by side. Severo went half a step behind, as always, and I went half a step ahead, as never before. The private wing hallway was short, with dark wood flooring that creaked at one spot only, always the same one, as if the house wanted to register who passed by there. There were 3 doors, the one to my room, the one to a small office, and his. He stopped in front of his. He didn't say anything. He just turned his face to me. The question came whole without sound, forehead slightly tilted, jaw tense, right hand still at hip height, as if he'd forgotten what to do with it. Severo Belandi asking for permission in silence was something none of the families of Chicago would believe possible. I didn't answer with a word. I walked up to him, lifted my chin, and waited. He held my face with both hands. He was in no hurry. There was weight. I closed my eyes. The kiss came firm, short, decisive. He rested his forehead against mine for an instant that seemed like the entire weight of 6 weeks, and then he opened the door without letting go of my face. I went in first. The door closed behind us with the discreet click of a decision made by 2 adults in the same second. The night stayed there. The Sunday sun hit the kitchen counter hard when I came down. I was wearing his shirt, the sleeve rolled 3 times at the wrist and the top button open, barefoot on the cold marble floor that held the temperature of the early morning as if it didn't want to let it go. I'd slept little. I'd slept the way no one has slept in years. Severo was already standing, with his back to the door, in dark pajama pants and nothing above. His shoulders had a scar on the left one that I swore I'd counted the night before, but the angle now was different. He was making coffee, too, without hesitating a single time, without checking whether I'd come down, as if he knew. "You wake up before the rooster," he said, without turning. "You don't sleep. Statistically, I wake up after." He laughed. He laughed quietly, but he laughed, and the word laughed seemed wrong when the sound came from him. It seemed more like a contained echo of some old laugh he'd forgotten how to release. "Sit." I'm sitting. I climbed onto the stool. The seat was cold at first contact. Then it warmed up. He put the cup in front of me. I held it with both hands as always. The coffee was strong, and the smell came first, hot and dense in the still air of the kitchen. For some reason, it was the smell that tightened my throat, not the coffee. The smell of that kitchen on that morning, with that light coming in through the side window, with that person there. "More water," I said. "Yours is the way you like it. Mine is the way I like it. Different." "Ah." He rested his forearms on the counter on the other side, came to my level. His eyes were clear for the first time since the hotel ballroom. "I have something for you. More coffee." Before the coffee, he took a bronze key out of his pants pocket. Small, old, with a leather strap tied through the hole. He placed it on the marble between the 2 cups. I looked. I didn't touch it. "What is it?" "The deed has been in your name since Thursday. The key has been in my pocket since Friday. I wanted to give it when you decided to stay, not before. The bakery. Your bakery." I took the key. It was heavier than it looked. Important keys always are. I squeezed it in my palm until the leather strap marked my skin, until I felt the metal warming in contact with my hand, as if it were alive. I didn't cry. Almost. I didn't get there. Severo Belandi managed the impossible in me twice in 24 hours. Severo. Why in my name? Because a gift in the name of the one who gives it isn't a gift. It's a leash. I squeezed the key harder. "Ah, thank you." No. Don't thank me for giving you back what was yours before I existed." I didn't know what to answer, so I didn't. I just lifted the cup, took a big sip, and looked at him over the rim. He held my gaze. There was something different about him that morning. Not the usual restraint, not the calculation. Just a man in a kitchen, his arms resting on the counter, looking at me as if he were verifying that I was still there. It was the sound of the service door that broke the spell. Livia came in with a tray, stopped 1 step inside the kitchen, saw the 2 of us, me in his shirt, him without a shirt, the key on the counter between the cups, and her face softened by 0.5 millimeter. Only half, but I saw it. 6 weeks inside that house had taught me to read her smallest expressions as if they were shouts. "Good morning," she said, calmly. "Oh, and I'll leave the towels in the blue room." "Good morning, Livia," I answered. She was already leaving. She left without slamming the door, which for her was a declaration of affection. Severo looked at me again. She liked it. She approved. "Is that different? In her house?" "It is." Sasha showed up 20 minutes later, brought by Dante. I heard her voice before I saw her, protesting about the car's speed, about the silent driver, about the fact that no one in a mobster's mansion knew how to greet people with a bread roll in hand. She stopped at the kitchen door. She looked at me. She looked at Severo. She looked back at me. Her eyes did the entire route in 2 seconds, from my head to my bare feet on the cold floor, before landing on the bronze key on the marble. "Oh, that shirt is his." "It is. Is it fresh?" "Sasha, I'm asking." She crossed her arms, leaned against the doorframe. "Dawn, good morning. Coffee. Good morning, Sasha. Sit." Severo pushed a cup toward her without turning his head. He'd already set out a third one without my noticing. She sat. She tasted it. She raised an eyebrow. "You rich folks know how to make coffee. I'll give you that." Dante leaned against the doorframe, behind her. He didn't sit. He accepted the cup Severo pushed and drank standing, his eyes passing over the kitchen with the calm of someone used to entering every kind of environment and showing nothing. His eyes passed over me, registered the shirt, registered the key on the counter, and went back to Severo without comment. It was his way of applauding. I recognized it now. "She's an owner now," Sasha said, pointing at the key with her cup. "I want to put my name on some cake, like a rich person." "You can put your name on the receipt," I said. "Like me. Cruel. Fair." Severo let out that quiet laugh again. Sasha raised an eyebrow at him, then at me, then at Dante. "Okay, this here has become a home. I get it. I'm going back to the safe hotel because there's a bigger TV there." She still stayed. She drank the whole coffee. She stole a piece of bread that Livia had left on the light wooden board near the stove. She talked about a crazy customer from the old bakery. Severo listened. Dante listened. I listened. For 30 minutes, the Belandi mansion seemed like any house on any Sunday morning, with light coming through the windows and cups warming our hands, and the weight of 6 months from 6 years before lifted off my shoulders without my noticing. Severo's phone rang. He looked at the screen, raised a finger to me in a 1 minute and gesture, and went out to the garden to answer. Sasha pushed the stool closer to mine. "Are you okay?" she whispered. "I think I am." "You think?" "I never was before. I don't know how to recognize it." She squeezed my hand on the marble. It was a short gesture. Sasha didn't make long gestures. That's why that one had weight. "I recognize it," she said. "You are." Dante cleared his throat from the door. Sasha lifted her head very slowly to look at him. Dante held her gaze for 1 second longer than necessary, and then looked away to his cup as if the cup had said something interesting. I filed it away. Sasha got up. "I'm going to steal another bread roll and leave before this kitchen turns into a soap opera." She grabbed the bread. She kissed my forehead. She left after Dante without looking at him. I stayed alone at the counter for 30 seconds, with the morning light warming the marble and the silence gaining texture around me, thick and soft, very different from the silence of the previous days. I looked through the glass to see where Severo had stopped. He had his back to me in the garden, phone to his ear, free hand at the nape of his neck. The white shirt, the one I wasn't wearing, was draped over his shoulder like a towel. The winter garden had lost its flowers, but the dark shrubs gave the space a seriousness that suited him. That's when I saw the gate. Ettore was coming in for Sunday brunch. Black car, his own driver, slow steps over the gravel. He wore a light open-collared blazer and a silk handkerchief I recognized from the meeting the day before. He came with a cake box in his hands, the precise cordiality of a man arriving as if he hadn't lost anything the day before, and smiling, not at anyone, at the gravel, at the morning, at himself. It was a wide smile, corner to corner, of a man who is exactly where he wanted to be, who wakes up at peace because he slept at peace, who carries no weight that he didn't place there on purpose. For half a second, the applause from the meeting came back, the 3 claps, the rhythm too slow to be genuine enthusiasm. The comment beside the chair, "Severo chose well," and now, that easy smile for someone who'd come to brunch at his nephew's house after watching the alliance he himself had helped build collapse before 12 patriarchs the day before. I squeezed the bakery key in my palm without realizing it. The leather strap bit again. He smiled too easily. The thought came whole, clear, the exact size of a sentence written in a notebook, and I was going to hold on to it. I was going to open my mother's notebook to the first blank page and write that too. Just as I'd written, the uncle knew I was going to enter through the back. I'd started to plan the gesture, to imagine the pen in my hand, the blank page waiting. Severo came in through the kitchen door at that second. I saw his reflection in the glass before the sound of his steps. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, stopped behind my stool, and hugged me from behind, his chin tucked at the top of my head, his arms crossed over my chest. "What are you thinking about?" he murmured. The thought dissolved. It was too quick for me to hold. The warmth of his skin passed through the shirt, the smell of coffee mixed with the smell of cedar from his neck, and the key stopped biting my hand because I relaxed my fingers. "About the coffee," I said. "About you. About the key. Liar. A little about the butler. He hates me. The butler hates everyone. It's his talent." I smiled. I leaned my head back, against his chest. Ettore out there, on the gravel, became a blur in the corner of the window. Severo. Stay. I didn't leave. Stay more. He tightened the embrace. He didn't say anything. He tightened it. It was his answer to my, "I'm staying," from yesterday in the library, but in body. People like him spoke more with the weight of an arm than with a word. The kitchen went silent, not the heavy silence from the eve of the ball, not the tense silence from the meeting with the patriarchs. It was a smooth silence, without an edge, that fit between 2 cups cooling on the marble and 2 pairs of lungs breathing at the same rhythm. A silence in which you could hear only the tick of the clock above the door, the wind on the window pane, and the breathing of 2 people who had, for the first time in their adult lives, someone to return to. I closed my eyes, the key in my hand, his shirt on my body, his arms around me, the coffee cooling between the 2 cups, the garden out there, the Sunday sun, coffee and silence, the 2 together, at peace, for the first time. Lena here. That wraps up book 1, and I've already finished book 2. You can get access to it for a really small fee. I loved him. I slept in the curve of his arm. I believed him when he promised that no one would touch my life without me knowing why. On the night my bakery would finally be ready, I thought life was giving me back everything it had once taken from me. Hours later, it was set on fire. I arrived in time to see the flames swallow my mother's recipe notebooks, the tables I'd chosen with care, my golden name dripping down the sidewalk like wax. That was the only dream I'd ever called my own, and it was gone. Then the evidence began to appear. A black sedan registered in his family's name, parked right on the corner. A signature in the car's checkout log. Everything pointed to Severo, and for the first time, I was afraid of the man who slept beside me. But there was something wrong with that picture. The car was too pretty, too calm. Parked under the streetlight, with the license plate turned exactly toward the camera, as if it had posed. Whoever has been hiding tracks for 60 years doesn't park like that by accident. It was a setup, and it was from the inside. What if the flames had been lit to make me flee from the right arms? What if the same hand that forged that signature had already set his life on fire once, years before, and he'd never noticed? What if the man who consoled Severo's grief, coffee by coffee, was the same one who planted the next wound in the same breath? I knew the name. It was on the tip of my tongue. I just didn't know whether I could count on my voice, or on a hidden recorder, until Severo appeared and stopped me from doing it. And there I understood. The one in danger was me, the one who knew nothing. Like I said, that was just a taste of book 2. To watch it uncensored, just click on the first link here in the pinned comment. I'll see you on the other side in a few seconds. Remember, just click on the first link down here in the comments, and book 2 complete, no ads, no interruptions, will already be available for you. It's very simple. Book 2 is something I'm loving making. You're loving it too, so I promise there will be more. It's where you find increasingly spicy stories, a true dark romance. And precisely because this version is getting more and more heated, the video isn't well accepted publicly on YouTube. This closed environment is where I can actually share my essence and where I feel free to do my best work for you. More news coming soon. I'll be waiting for you on the other side. Congratulations! Your purchase has been confirmed, and you now have full access to books 1 and 2 of all our stories, completely ad-free and uninterrupted. Everything is available on the My Stories platform, from Mafia romance and billionaire romance to our spicier tales. This content is ready for you now, with new episodes added daily. Access is simple. Just log in using the same email address you used for your purchase. A confirmation has also been sent to that same email. The My Stories platform is very simple and intuitive. Each image represents a story. If it has a book too, just click and press play. Everything is already unlocked for you. You can also rate each story, leave a like, and write a comment. Your feedback will be visible to all our other subscribers. This is our romance universe, so please feel free to interact. From this moment on, this is officially your home for romance stories. Just head over to mystoriesromance.com and press play. Welcome to the family.